Welcome to another episode of Money for Nothing, the podcast about music and capitalism. Today, you'll be hearing an interview between Sam and Kara of the Idolcast podcast, which covers all things around East Asian pop music. In a previous episode, we brought Kara on to give us a kind of rundown of the history and inner workings of K-pop. And if you haven't noticed, there's been some serious backroom business rumblings going on in the K-pop industry, and so we decided to invite her back on to parse it all out and better understand it. And if you're not like a fan of K-pop, or maybe you don't like pay attention to its music or like what's going on in the industry, the story is like still really extremely fascinating because the massive juggernaut that the K-pop industry is in Korea is starting to reach on over here into the United States, involving such people as the infamous Scooter Braun and also the great Atlanta record label, independent rap record label, Quality Control. And so it's interesting to see that now it's not just the music that's crossing over, but now actually some of its business dealings. Anyways, I'll leave it to Sam and Kara to parse it all out. I unfortunately was not able to join the interview because of scheduling conflict, but they definitely took care of business. Once again, please rate and review us, subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on all the socials, and feel free to email us. We'd love to hear from people. Okay, here's the interview. Enjoy.
Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I really, really appreciate it.
No, of course. I was happy that you asked. I'm actually looking into SM Entertainment for another episode that I'm working on, so it was good timing.
This is, I guess, a little bit delayed, but there were all kinds of, I would say, a particularly money for nothing rumblings in the, Korean music industry. And so, of course, we had to reach out to our, now resident idol expert for professional opinion on what's going on.
Yeah, or what did happen.
What didn't happen.
Yeah, what didn't happen. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And what's to come. I don't know how far back you want to start or where you want to start this story.
So let's start maybe with the kind of what you described in a post on your blog as a succession-worthy boardroom drama. And maybe we can start by just talking about a truly monumental attempted merger, and then maybe go backwards and then go forwards.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So the basics of the story that kind of got played out across, Bloomberg News and the Financial Times, among other places. It sort of starts with this activist fund called Align that's spearheaded by this sort of ex-Goldman Sachs banker. And he is one of many, or at least a handful of these, I don't know if you'd call them like global banking people. I'm not an economist, so, but basically they've identified Korea and the Korean stock market as having all these undervalued companies. One of those undervalued companies was SM Entertainment. And so Align comes in, buys a 1% share of the stocks. And this is in 2022. And basically one of the first things that they do is identify some dead weight that's holding back the profitability of SM Entertainment. And that dead weight is Lee Soo-man, who is the founder, no longer the CEO, but he's the very prominent in the company. And he had set up way back in 1997, had set up kind of this, I don't know what you would call it.
It's like a consultancy firm, kind of
a management consultancy firm called Like Planning. And essentially, Like Planning, everything runs through Like Planning. And Like Planning was getting a 6% cut of basically everything that SM Entertainment did. Like right off the top, 6%. And this...
That's wild.
Right? It's pretty ballsy. And so, so this Goldman Sachs banker was like, we have a problem here. And so essentially the first thing that they did was get rid of Like Planning. And then they brought in a new CFO who was an accountant, not a show business person, entertainment industry person, but like an accountant who specializes in sort of rescuing these failing companies. So with those two things done, they kind of move forward, and Lee Soo-man is disassociated with SM. Basically, they say you're gone, you're out of here. I think that was December, maybe.
So maybe it's worth it to just take a second and talk about SM Entertainment and Lee Soo-man and like who exactly he is, what exactly this company is, and why it's so important for Korean popular music.
Yeah. Well, Lee Soo-man, he's a really interesting character, and I think in looking at SM Entertainment and their long history, I think it's really important to keep in mind that Lee Soo-man is essentially a Silicon Valley tech bro at heart. So he's a Korean. He was a singer, musician in the 70s as a young man. And then in like the early 80s, he goes to Caltech to study engineering. And this is where he famously, this is the kind of the lore, but he sees MTV and is very fascinated by it, comes back to Korea and wants to get right back into the entertainment business. And so he first tries with this company called SM Planning, built in 1989, off of the back of this, essentially the Bobby Brown of Korea, this guy named Hyunjin Young, who was popular. But he had...
I mean, he was the Bobby Brown of Korea, right?
Like the Bobby Brown of Korea, yeah.
Of course he's popular.
He was popular, sing, dance, rap, very handsome. Unfortunately, he was the Bobby Brown of Korea, and he had some drug issues. And so in 1991, Lee Soo-man, this was his artist. This was the guy he had put all this money into. And this guy gets basically arrested on stage at a concert and sent to jail. On stage, literally on stage while performing.
Wait, on stage?
The story that I found anyway. And I've seen it in a couple of places. It could be apocryphal, but I think it's probably
print
true.
the legend. Am I right?
Right. But the legend is he's performing on stage at this outdoor concert in Busan, which is way down in the south of Korea. But these big burly guys suddenly burst out onto the stage and like haul him off. And everyone's just like looking at each other like, what just happened? This being Korea, unfortunately, he was just, busted for smoking weed, which seems like not a big deal to us, but it was a big deal, and he went to jail. He comes back out. Lee Soo-man, this incident like really devastated that SM Planning company, like wiped them out. But they try again with Hyunjin Young. And what happens the second time, he has this massive hit record. Everything's going great. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies. But unfortunately, the company that was manufacturing those albums, those hundreds and hundreds of thousands of albums, went bankrupt because they had brought over the New Kids on the Block for a concert tour in Seoul. And there was it was actually really sad. There was a crowd crush incident. And a girl died, and others were very, very seriously
That's terrible.
injured.
I feel really bad for laughing now.
Oh no, I set it up as funny because but yeah, it was really, really sad. But I mean, in terms of SM planning, they had all of this money that essentially it vanishes, right? It just vanishes. Because this company basically went bankrupt that had all their money from the albums.
Just like not an
so
uncommon like indie label distribution story, actually.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So they try a third time. The year is 1993. And it's, everything is gearing up great. Hyunjin Young, super duper successful. Like, again, the Bobby Brown of Korea. He's just really big star. And then he releases his third album, New Dance 3, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pre-orders, all of this merch lined up and ready to go. Hyunjin Young gets arrested a second time for drugs and essentially just wipes out SM planning. Company goes bankrupt. Lee Soo-man basically goes bankrupt. Like he has to sell off personal property just to pay people back. And it's out of this incident, like this, the ashes of this, that SM Entertainment is formed in 1995. And I think it's kind of important just to know sort of some of this history, because I think it's easier to understand why he would form this shell company like planning to take kind of just this safe cut off the top of everything, if you understand that he had been wiped out like 3 times, like through no fault of his own,
Yeah. No, that makes a tremendous amount of sense, actually. It sounds also like this is a man who will not accept defeat, which also like kind of continues throughout much of the story.
It really, really does. He is a determined guy. And he's also like, he's like I said, he's like this tech bro. Like he went to Caltech. Like he's so when he sees Bobby Brown like on MTV, like his thought is like, well, how can I do this in Korea? He's like, I like this, let's do this in Korea. And essentially that's kind of how the history of SM goes, more or less. There are some bumps along the way. So one of the incidents that keeps getting brought up is so in 1996, right? So SM Entertainment founded in 1995 on the ashes of kind of this financial mess. And Lee Soo-man, determined not to have that mess happen again, he creates kind of like the safest product of all time, which is like this. He's kind of like a Lou Pearlman, almost like forming this boy band out of these very talented trainees, and kind of sets them loose, and they crush it. They're like the biggest thing of all time ever. All this money is coming in.
Which group is this again?
This is HOT, who are the first. They were the first K-pop group. They were the ones. They were sort of based on SMAP.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
But with the
and
cooking too?
No, unfortunately, no cooking. But they had other stuff.
For listeners who don't get that reference, you're going to have to go back and listen to the previous episode that Kara was on when we discussed cooking SMAP in the detail it deserves, frankly.
Yeah, it is legendary for good reason. SMAP are legendary for good reason. But yeah, no, HOT, they're really great. I have an episode on them with like this HOT super fan if you're interested in digging into them. But yeah, there are all these issues with like their contracts and stuff, and in 2000 SM, they get listed on the stock exchange, the cost, whatever the NASDAQ is, like the equivalent in Korea. But it turns out that there was a problem with how this happened, that they did not have enough capital, really. And Lee Soo-man had done some creative accounting, we'll say, where he...
Chicanery. We call it chicanery.
And basically...
we love chicanery on
yeah,
this podcast.
Some real financial chicanery. And yeah, he kind of made it look like SM had more money. He like borrowed money and then put it back into the company, making it look like they had more capital than they actually did in order to get them listed, which they were in 2000. All of this kind of comes out in 2001, and Lee Soo-man kind of flees to the US for a few years. And this is called, or known as, kind of the dark era of SM entertainment. But then
this is the dark era.
Yeah, this is the dark era. Yeah, where Lee Soo-man's
not the previous eras.
on the lam. Well, at least he had hits in the previous eras. But yeah, so he's on the lam. But then he ends up coming back in 2003, because I guess there's like a famous, you can find it, photo going around of him like wanted by Interpol. But yeah, he comes back.
He can't be stopped.
The man can't be stopped. No, he's a legend. He's, I mean, deservedly like one of the legends. But yeah, so he ends up getting a pardon from the president. I mean, he serves his probation time, but yeah, he ends up getting a pardon.
And that pardon has like nothing to do with any like connections or financial dealings. Okay, yeah, cool. Cool. Okay,
it's all above board. But I think, again, for this story, it's important to understand that like Lee Soo-man, he wasn't the only one. Like when Lee Soo-man goes on the lam in 2001, and then he's part of like an effort to clean up corruption in the entertainment industry. There are other people that were also getting like their pictures, in the press, and that are all associated together in Korean language articles. The thing is, and I think one of the reasons that the coverage of Lee Soo-man and SM Entertainment gets so skewed is that we only know this story because of K-pop and all the English language K-pop coverage. But like he was one of like three big like celebrities that was like, they were always grouped together in these articles, like these three well-known people. One was a comedian, the other one was another like CEO of another entertainment company, right? So I think like, not that what Lee Soo-man did was like amazing and great, but he wasn't the only one. And then when he gets pardoned in, I think it was 2000, is it like 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. But he was just like one of a list of businessmen that got pardoned, right? This is just how business got done. Like he's not an outlier. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember, like as we, kind of go down through the years, because I think that, that isn't always conveyed in some of these stories. This is just how business got done back in the day.
Yeah, no, when I was saying that, I think it's a really, really useful point. And I mean, I'm not by any means an expert in like developing nations, which South Korea in the early 2000s is like, it's very much like a rapidly growing economic powerhouse that's just like making leaps and bounds. But my sense is that in the relationship between state and sectors and the kinds of maneuvering a nation has to do when it's like on the come up in a very competitive neighborhood is really complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to remember too, we're just a few years out from like the massive like financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis. And so you do have a concerted effort on the part of the government working with industry. And the fact too that the industry in Korea they're called like the chaebol companies, which are these family run like little, they're like little, or big actually, like they're just these big family run companies that have their hands in everything. So like Parasite, which people probably saw, that movie is the product of a chaebol company, CJ and so that's it's just something that the friendly relationship with these chaebols with each other, with their like the different arms of all the chaebol companies working together. And then you have just the fact that they are these family run companies. Yeah, I mean, in some ways this kind of practice still goes on today. where you have like the different arms will form and then merge together because somebody's uncle needs to have a job or get paid, or like like some cousin needs a money stream, and then you have all these backroom like handshake deals. So Hybe, which is the other big player in this story, the founder of Hybe, Bang Shi-hyuk, who is somebody who never turns down a CNN interview, but his cousin is the founder of Netmarble, which the major, like they're under CJ, I think they're under CJ. If I get that wrong, I'm sorry, but they're under one of these big paywall companies. But
right.
But Netmarble then works with Hype to make a BTS game. And do you think they're getting like the most competitive deal there? Like, probably not. So you have a lot of this stuff that goes on, and so that's why, fast forward all the way to 2022, that you have this like Goldman Sachs banker who is like looking around this the stock market
like,
at all these companies.
What is going on?
Like, wow, there's a lot of like untapped value here. Putting on his like global like capital glasses, like, ooh, look at all this. It's like entering the Emerald City, and like, wow, look at all this value that's available. Because we don't have to pay Lee Soo-man 6% of everything. Like, what are we doing that for? Like, just get rid of this guy. So that's kind of the situation that
little did they know that Lee Soo-man is not, if they had just listened to the last 20 minutes of this podcast, they would know that Lee Soo-man is not a man you can just, quote unquote, get rid of.
He's not going to go quietly. Nothing can keep him down. Like, nothing, like jail, no, Interpol, like nobody.
So just really, really briefly, before we kind of snap back to the near present. So it's 2003, SM Entertainment is back on track. And so just like
Well, okay, so what happens, what really happens is the only thing that kept SM Entertainment kind of afloat while Lee Soo-man was off playing golf in LA was the shoulders of the entire company rested on a very teeny tiny teenager named Boa, and they had kind of packed her off to Japan, and we're like, okay, be a star now, and she did it. And so it was essentially Boa and her Japanese album sales that kept SM Entertainment afloat for those years. So when you hit 2003, and kind of Lee Soo-man gets back in the picture, that is when a group called TVXQ comes together, and they were put together specifically to target, like the way that they were formed, it was like they wanted to attack all of Asia at once. And so like their name, you could read it in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, like they also got shipped off to Japan to great success. But that is when like that, it was really like Boa in Japan, and then TVXQ in Japan, and then that kind of ramps up Girls' Generation, Shiny, like all of these, you start to hit like the real golden era of what they call, or K-pop fans, if you talk to them, they'll call second generation K-pop. And that is where that kicks off. But yeah, and from there, I think it's pretty smooth sailing-ish.
So they're producing just like idol group after idol group.
Yeah, and like banger after banger. I mean, and they start doing some pretty creative things. Like, so in, I think it's 2010, you have this thing coming together called SM Town, which is kind of this real brand unity of getting like all of the groups together, and they perform in LA, and it's just like this huge, massive success. And it's just stuff like that, like where no one had really attempted that before, to bring like a K-pop festival. And one of the things that was like noted at the time was that the audience had a very significant number of like non-Asians in it in that LA concert. So yeah, it's just stuff like that. And then like I think it's 2012. Fans are going to kill me. That EXO debuts, and it's all of these very creative things that they keep doing. Where like EXO is meant to attack like the Chinese market and the Korean market at the same time, but they also for the first time introduce this like sci-fi lore and storytelling. Because, and here's another player who comes in later, but the guy kind of introducing all this lore and stuff is Lee Soo-man's nephew, Chris Lee, who would later become CEO. But back in 2012, sort of as this golden era is really hitting, he's an A&R guy, and a really good one too, because he watches the fans. He is pretty on top of what fans like, and so he introduces this concept of like this extended EXO universe, and they all have like powers, and I think he's the one that brings in like EXO do like a Star Wars song like for the movie in Korea. Like he starts bringing in like all of this stuff and fans do love it. Like it's great. And then like moving forward, like they introduce stuff like the virtual concerts, and they have a messaging service Bubble that it's like a pay thing, and artists can like send out like paid messages. But yeah, they're always innovating. Like SM is they're always innovating. But yeah, it's pretty smooth sailing kind of once they get over that dark era.
And so at the same time in this 2010 20 late 2000s early 2010s, as we kind of introduce our characters, another company gets founded, which is Big Hit Entertainment Company Limited.
Well, Big Hit, actually, they come up, it's closer to like the mid, Bang Shi-hyuk. He is you see him on CNN as like this billionaire CEO mogul, titan of industry. He gets his start as a songwriter producer working with JYP, Jin Young Park, and he spins off his own kind of subsidiary company, essentially providing like production for JYP artists. And again, this is just like how things worked back then. Like you want a real cut of the money, you have to have your own company that gets like paid as like a production company. And
JYP is
they're another major player, and they still are. And I think he's the only one of the sort of big guys that never took his company public, which is he's an interesting guy, JYP.
Not the worst call, to be honest.
To be honest, yeah. Yeah, actually, if anyone is curious, he appears with Conan. Like when Conan O'Brien goes to Korea, like JYP pops up in that. But yeah, so Bang starts off as like the songwriter producer, and he originally has this idea he wants to make like an interactive like a web comic that's going to have like an idol component, but also a story component and like songs. And like he has this very ambitious idea that completely flops. It, does not do well. And so he kind of goes back to producing and writing, and he's doing okay. But when you come to kind of that like 2010, 2011, 2012, it's around that time that the K-pop industry is coalescing as like a K-pop industry, and idols are booming. Like the idol business is booming. And so Big Hit, which had been doing kind of like these ballad groups and very, we would call it like what, middle of the road or like easy listening, or that kind of very just like normal people music. He sees clearly that like, oh, if I want to make money, I need to be doing that over there. And so that's where he kind of gets this idea for what would become BTS. There was just this massive boom in hip hop idol groups, like this huge boom. And so he gets in on it with his hip hop idol group BTS. And
I mean, in fairness, it was a good idea, I guess.
Yeah. It was a great idea.
That worked out. That worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah. So yeah. But he again had some. There's a lot of drama that went on with Big Hit. They had a girl group called Glam that one of the members had to quit because it turns out she was a stalker. And then another member.
She was a stalker.
She was a stalker.
Oh,
yeah,
dear.
She was, yeah. And then another quit because she was caught blackmailing this famous actor.
What?
Yeah. This has all been memory holds, but yeah, if you were around at the time. Yeah, I forget his name. He was in the G.I. Joe movie. Yeah, but this is all the drama comes out. But so Glam, which so they had these two, they were supposed to be the girl group and then the boy group, and these are going to be our two tentpole groups of Big Hit. But the girl group imploded. It was a huge mess. And then this is about 2015, and so this is the point where they're kind of okay, well, we really have to double down and make some money. And so BTS just start grinding, just working super.
And ladies and
hard.
gentlemen, they did indeed make some money.
They made some money big time. But those are kind of the origins of the Bang PD, and what I think is interesting, if you follow kind of the path of BTS, is that he does keep trying to do that ongoing story, because there's this whole thing with the BTS extended universe, that there's now actually a web drama, a web series that's going to be this what his original idea of the you have the series and you have the songs and you have the idols, and we'll have to see if it, the world wasn't ready in 2007, but we're ready now in 2023. It'll be interesting.
So and the funny thing about Big Hit, correct me if I'm wrong, which is later renamed Hybe, is that unlike SM, it really the BTS show there to a pretty remarkable extent. It's really built around this one band, to the point where I think employees were arraigned for insider trading for selling stocks after the news of BTS, I guess, slowing down, I guess. It's not a hiatus exactly, but no, am I wrong?
Well, no, you're right. And it is, I would say that wasn't the intention. It happened that way, but that was not the intention on the part of Big Hit to have the BTS show. That was never the plan.
No. But it was, they end up really, and I think that what we'll talk about, I mean, I think that's a really important driver for kind of the story that we're outlining here, right? Is Big Hit or Hybe is a tremendously profitable company based mostly around a single artist that is really trying to not stay that way.
Yeah, because they have tried. Here's the thing that's interesting in that about Big Hit / Hybe that's very different from SM, is that while SM, I think their real strength has, definitely the sort of techie Silicon Valley bro mindset of Lee Soo-man has been a very good for them in just getting their content in front of people. But the fact is they've always had really good content. SM Entertainment makes great music. They put out great idol groups, and fans really like it. They keep their fans satisfied, and they have done for since 1989, right?
Right.
And Big Hit, they have BTS, and they tried with the girl group Glam. They had some of these middle of the road acts that are kind of like vestigially there, like if you know where to look, like you can kind of like find them. And then like that was it. Like for you, they just had BTS. Like they put everything, like they just doubled down. They bet it all on BTS, and I mean it worked. It might not have, but yeah, they tried to debut another boy group called TXT and market them as BTS's little brothers, essentially. But I mean, TXT has ended up doing okay, but they're considered part of like the fourth generation of K-pop, and there's a lot of issues with the fourth generation that we can maybe touch on if we get to it. But the fourth generation of K-pop has problems, and like they've sustained themselves, essentially Big Hit, HYBE, by purchasing other companies. So they bought the company that had the second biggest boy group at the time, 17. So now 17 is under HYBE. That's just that's just what they've done.
And we'll talk about this later. They also bought Ithaca Holdings, which is Scooter Braun's label, which has Ariana Grande and J Biebs.
And just around the time that all of this, Succession drama was popping off in like February 2023, they bought a label down in Atlanta. Was it the
Quality Control?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most successful independent rap label. Coach K's Quality Control, probably the most successful independent rap label of the 2010s. Migos, City Girls, a lot of really major stars.
And Bang PD has talked about buying like some like in South America and Africa. Like he has a lot of ambition. But that's what they've done. Like SM made idols, artists, and HYBE outside of BTS has mostly been just purchasing them.
Okay. I think that we have had enough setup for the drama.
Yeah, it's I mean, K-pop is fascinating.
It's a tangled web,
It's a very tangled web, yeah, because it's not even worth like trying to pick apart like who owns who and like what, like how many shell companies were formed. I mean, like planning is the important one to know, because I think that was kind of the last straw for our Goldman Sachs banker.
So let's go back to our Goldman Sachs banker, who shows up
and is like, "What?"
in Korea, and is like, "What is happening?
What is going on here?" Yeah, so he gets enough like clout behind him and is like, "Okay, you have to get rid of like planning. You have to." And so they get rid of like planning. And they get rid of Lee Soo-man. They bring in this accountant from outside the entertainment industry, like a legit, like, financial guy. And then everything kind of comes to a head in, I want to say maybe January 2023. There's a letter that goes out threatening, like, if they really don't clear up the corruption, people are gonna get investigated and maybe go to jail. And I think this kind of puts everyone on edge, and people that maybe had been supporting Lee Soo-man were like, ooh, maybe I should instead line up behind a line, because that seems to be where I won't go to jail. And so you have these kind of divisions forming,
and then Lee Soo-man's nephew is a major part of this, right?
Yes. Sorry, yeah. So Lee Soo-man's nephew at the time is the CEO, and he's the
former A&R guy.
Great A&R guy, which unfortunately he seems to have been promoted to his highest level of incompetence, because he does not handle all of this very well at all. Because he was promoted up in 2019 or 2020. And yeah, things kind of, well, I mean, the pandemic didn't help, sure, but.
And basically from my research, it seems like he is technically the CEO, but all the decisions are going through Lee Soo-man's shady, semi-shady, allegedly shady, like, management consulting company that is kind of like this weird organ attached to SM Entertainment that is making all the decisions. And that, is that right? Kind of?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, yeah. And it's, it's an organ that I think, maybe you don't know what it does, but everyone's been like, well, let's just leave it alone. Everything kind of seems to work. So let's just keep it as is. But yeah. So he was CEO. But yeah, a lot of the artistic decisions and all that kind of stuff. Everything kind of funneled through planning.
And it seemed,
including that 6%.
The 6%, and it seems a little bit right. To me, and correct me if I'm wrong here. You can imagine some of the forces that bring things to a head, right? It's 2020, 21, 2022. The world's eyes are increasingly on K-pop. They're increasingly on the massive, just Olympic-sized swimming pools of cash that companies clearly can produce. And my sense is that SM Entertainment, while very, very, very profitable, is not doing high levels necessarily.
Yeah, they're not doing high levels at all. And I think, that's where our Align banker comes in and is like, we have a gap here between money coming in and money that could be coming in.
And so at that point, there is a kind of a palace coup a little bit, right? Where the nephew is like, I'm not going to serve as a rubber stamp anymore. We're going to cut ties with this consulting company. Except that Lee Soo-man doesn't just own the consulting company. Lee Soo-man, the founder of SM Entertainment, owns the largest, I believe, chunk of SM Entertainment at 18%.
Yeah, he was a majority shareholder. Yeah, and there's another piece here too, which is, you have all of these things kind of getting lined up behind the scenes. This letter goes out, people are on edge, and Chris Lee he's really between a rock and a hard place. I kind of feel bad for the guy. Actually, I think he didn't handle this well, but it was a tough situation.
We all saw Succession. It's not fun. You don't actually want to be one of the Roys.
No, you don't. And so he's, he doesn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want to, he's like, okay, well, I'm going to keep my job. I'm going to go with Align. And what Align wanted to do was bring in Kakao, which is the massive tech company, huge, the Google of Korea, basically. And Kakao has wanted to really beef up their entertainment wing before taking it public. And if you know, oh my God, Kakao, I sent you the link, their big product, was this of 2020, early 2023 was this AI idol group that were just, it looks like a bad cutscene. It's terrible. No, they wanted that SM content, that quality SM content. And so Kakao was also flush with money from the Saudi, what is it, the PIF. It's all over the news today because they just bought that golf tournament.
Right. And Kakao publishes games and apps. And there's they have their own, I think this is important for when we get to kind of the implications of this. They have platforms too. So Kakao Talk is this large platform. I mean, according to Wikipedia, 93% of South Korean users are on it, which seems incredibly high, but
Yeah, and they also own Melon, which is like the biggest, although I think YouTube may have actually passed it, but one of the biggest, if not the biggest, like streaming, like music streaming platforms in Korea as well. So they're like they're a massive company. But yeah, they have the platforms, but they don't have the content, which is what SM can provide them. So this seems like a great deal. They have all this money. So yeah, Align and Chris Lee, and yeah, they kind of work with Kakao. Kakao's going to buy, it was like enough shares to get them a stake at the table. And
then
and then yeah, well, so then they also announced this SM 3.0 thing that really, really, really hammers it home. They make the announcement, we're moving to SM 3.0, kind of really putting a bow on the fact that Lee Soo-man was out and gone, and, you know, thank you for your service.
Little did they know.
Yeah. Well, conveniently, they'd forgotten the fact that he was the majority shareholder, and he did not like this deal. He did not like anything about it. And
well, just to be really clear, he thought he was the largest shareholder. He doesn't have 51%, right? I thought he had...
No.
He has the largest chunk. Like, he can't make decisions unilaterally, but he has the largest chunk of shares of this company. It's the biggest voting bloc at the time, right?
Yeah, at the time he had the biggest voting bloc. And there's something, too, that, like, not all the people that own stock can vote. It's
totally
like,
possible. That's
like
the thing that happens.
Where it's like you only need 40% to have like a majority.
Oh, so then if he has 18, he's actually very close to being a majority shareholder.
Yeah, but he's the largest shareholder anyway. And so, yeah, so he takes SM to court to stop this deal, and which he does. And he also goes to Hybe and is like, hey, do you want to be the biggest shareholder in SM? And Hybe is like, yes, we do. And yeah, that kind of kicks off just weeks of breathless K-pop drama where like SM, like Chris Lee made like a series of videos that were like, don't watch them. It's just like cringe, major cringe hours. And Bang PD did what he does best, which is like kind of go on CNN and MSNBC and places like that and kind of puff himself up. I think it's during this time he's like on the cover of Billboard or whatever.
And so just to like, for those, you know, keeping score at home, like this is classic Idol, proven chops at producing idols, SM Entertainment. They're maybe going to get sucked into this huge platform company, but instead, in like this insane spoiler move, their ousted former chief and founder tries to sell, or does sell, all of his voting stocks to, in some ways, one of the company's biggest rivals in just a magnificent fuck you to his nephew, bringing Hybe within spitting distance of taking over, in some ways, like the kind of idol factory that they need to produce more content. I mean, in a weird way, this isn't exactly right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a little bit, I think of this, Hybe's move in this, right, is like, I think of SM as like an old school, like movie studio, you know, right? Like maybe a little bit down on its luck, but like knows how to make movies. And Hybe is like YouTube. It does a new thing really successfully, but like maybe doesn't have like the studio lot or the script writers.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. Because I was thinking too of like, sort of what happened at like Disney. When like Michael Eisner comes in, Disney had been so great at like the 2D animation and like at doing a certain thing, but then they'd been kind of down on their luck. And then you bring in this Michael Eisner and who wants to like get rid of animation and let's do live action and yeah, it's but that is definitely the vibe of like a company that is good at one thing, knows what it's doing, but it's not maybe growing in the same way that a company like Hybe is. That's like the new thing.
So now there's this like internal power struggle where like the current CEO of the company is pushing for one deal, and the founder and largest stakeholder is pushing for another deal. All of this out in the media, and it gets like, this is the drama. Like, it got to some real boardroom drama. My understanding is that to finish taking over the company, Hybe makes an offer for enough stock to bring it majority shareholding status, which, because of all the attention, SM's stock increases enough that offer does not make it. And then at that point, Hybe blinks and pulls back from offering even more money to purchase the company.
Because to be honest, I think they didn't have it. They had just bought that, what is it? Quality control, right? Like, they just bought that in February before all of this kicked off. Like, I don't think they had the money. Lee Soo-man got paid though. I think that's also important to remember in all of this. Like, Lee Soo-man, not only does he still have like 3% of his stock still, but yeah, he got a nice paycheck from Hybe for all of his shares, and I think he was crying all the way to the bank when Kakao finally swooped in.
And Kakao finally buys out Hybe's shares.
There was like a Friday evening deal or something between the two companies, and what comes out of it is that Kakao is going to take the majority ownership stake, but importantly, again, Hybe gets all of the SM artists on their platform, Weverse, and it really, I think, was a win-win-win situation for all three companies.
Right. Though, and while like the drama is maybe somewhat resolved, and we'll go into what this win-win-win looks like and what it says for kind of the future of Korean music and kind of the global music economy, it's also important to note that fairly recently, in like the last month or so, there has now been a new investigation.
Into the contracts. Yes.
Oh, I mean, I was talking about there's a new investigation into whether there was illegal boosting of SM stock right before, illegal potential investigation to whether there's illegal boosting of SM stock right before the final deadline. So it's possible that some more chicanery made it so that SM stock, which was just a little bit over what Hybe was offering, and if it hadn't been over it, the offer would have been accepted. And there's a question over whether its final stock price was like entirely kosher.
Anything is possible. There's financial chicanery is kind of hand in hand with K-pop. That's So I wouldn't be surprised if something came out. But I was going to say there was another investigation into SM because it came out 3 of the members of EXO.
These contracts.
Yes, so 3 of the members of EXO came out after all of this went down to say that like SM had been not negotiating with them, I guess, on a fair playing field, and had been like refusing to show them how much money was coming in and all sorts of other things.
Unheard of in the music industry.
No one's ever done it before.
No one's ever done it before. No one will ever do it again.
Yeah. Imagine that. Artists not getting treated fairly.
So to start kind of wrapping up this discussion, I think that your mention of Weverse is really, really important, because it seems like the kind of platformization, IPization, there's a kind of shift in that a lot of these moves are heading in the same general direction. kind of reflect, it seems like, an understanding by many of the major players in K-pop about kind of the future of the industry as a profit machine, as an entertainment industry, really. And that it's worth to kind of spend a little bit of time and kind of pick out what's going on there. So maybe to start with, you could tell just a little bit about Weverse and its role in Hybe's like vision of K-pop.
Yeah, so Weverse originally started off as kind of part chat platform, part like a shop. This was in like 2018, 2019 maybe. But over the last few years, especially the pandemic accelerating everything, has kind of rolled up a lot of functions of sort of the online K-pop sphere that used to be spread out. Things like streaming video, fan club sales, ticket sales, like the shopping elements. All of this stuff got rolled up into this one platform called Weverse. It's very unwieldy, unpleasant to use. There's a lot of complaints about it, but everything is kind of getting funneled into this one app that now you have, I think, the majority of the big K-pop acts are on it, along with AKB48, which is one of the big idol groups in Japan. They keep trying to get Western artists on it, but I just don't think, unless it was like a Taylor Swift, that you would really have a draw to Weverse. And they keep adding more pieces to this app. Like there's an albums part where you can like buy albums, and now you have to pay for everything in like the Weverse currency.
Jelly?
But yeah, jelly, yeah. So they just keep adding more and more functions, but it's very unclear to me, because I went back and looked at like the monthly, like what did they? It's like the unique monthly users or whatever and they keep promising way more than actually turn up. And I think that the problem that they're having with Weverse is the same problem that Kakao was having with its kind of K-pop content platforms, is that they just don't have like the content, like they don't have the IP. I mean, other than BTS, they're just not driving fans onto these platforms in the numbers that they would really need. And
though they're buying up other platforms, right? I mean, I read some like incredibly, one of those weird things about internet culture is reading like heart-rending stories about entire worlds you don't understand at all, which is like the V-Live eulogies.
Oh my God. That was really sad. I have one up. So V-Live was a platform done by Naver, and so Naver basically was like, okay, we're gonna sell to Hybe and shut it down, and they did transfer some videos over, but if you were an artist that was no longer active, or for whatever reason, maybe your company had gone under, like you were just out of luck, or if you didn't have a Weverse account and you had paid for content on V-Live, oops, it's gone. It's just one of those things with like these virtual platforms.
Digital dark ages, it's real.
Yeah. So fans were like frantically trying to download stuff, and I mean, it's pretty, it was a pretty sad day. But yeah, so they basically bought out V-Live. V-Live shut down. They had this Weverse video, but it just doesn't work as well. You have to pay for subtitles, or that's one of the things that Hybe has floated, that like subtitles, you used to just get them, or fans could add them, but now you're gonna have to pay for them. I mean, it's just all of this like monetization, like really wherever they can squeeze it in.
And it's really interesting, I think, because my understanding from talking and reading your work, talking to you and reading your work is that like K-pop is about so much more than just the music, right? There's a musical element, but it's really between a 3 and a 7-dimensional art form. And there's and that fan interaction and the cultivation of fan interaction and different kinds of fan interactions are all tremendously important, and that there are these kind of, universes that there's a sense among especially fans that kind of an artist's career is to a certain extent a co-creation between these community of fans and the idols. And it does, from a financial perspective, it makes sense that there'd be something really appealing for a company to try to bring not just selling music or selling concert tickets or selling certain like getting special glow sticks, all the different kinds of monetary touch points, but to bring that entire social universe into kind of a walled garden is I can see why that's an appealing plan for a company, especially if they can get an increasingly large chunk of the truly major idol groups on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing about SM 3.0, that plan that was announced, is that it kind of, it didn't have a Weverse component, but essentially it laid out a vision that was very similar to what Hybe is already doing, which if knowing that there's this banker behind the scenes saying hey, we can get more value out of our IP, so let's do what this other company that's getting a ton of value out of their IP is doing, makes sense, right? And so the idea, you have your primary content, your concert tickets, your albums, but this stuff is physical, right? There's only a certain number of concert tickets and can be sold. You can sell online tickets maybe, but even then there's a ceiling. And albums, you have to manufacture them. There's a physical album that has to get produced, and we've seen what happened with the vinyl backlogs and stuff. Right? But then
Sure.
If you can move to that secondary level where you're removed from the concrete, you're
selling community back to the community at some level.
At some level, yeah. And you're also selling a vision of this idol and this idol group that it's disconnected almost completely from the real people and the real reality of a person getting up on stage and singing and dancing for you and smiling at you. One of the things that Hybe has done, and I think that is also in the SM 3.0 plan, is this idea of so Hybe has created these cartoon avatars of BTS.
Yeah, digital idol stuff. Yeah,
and they're using them in place of BTS. They have their own music videos, and they have you can see them on advertisements and stuff. And unlike a real person, these cartoons are never gonna get arrested on stage for smoking marijuana in Busan. You can control them completely. And what I'm sort of the thought that I am constantly coming to as all of this stuff kind of plays out is that, and this is what I was talking about with the fourth generation stuff too, is that if you don't have that first level content that's really good, that's driving fans to want to sign up for a fan club membership. I have a fan club membership for a Japanese idol group, but I wouldn't do that if they didn't have that first level content, and so it's that's the piece at the bottom of it. You can say that you want to move away from music, but if you don't have that music, what is fueling everything else in this ecosystem, And I think that's also why that SM IP was so was like catnip to these big companies, because they need that fuel.
Sure.
They need that fuel for their platforms, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything to populate your ecosystem of metaverse concerts.
Yeah. It's really interesting what you're saying, just because, to dive into the aesthetic for a second. hearing you talk about this kind of fear about losing that direct connection, it's really fascinating, as like a profound outsider to this like cultural and musical form. I had thought about previously, before, talking to you before and doing research, thought of K-pop as this almost like ostentatiously artificial form, but it feels like hearing you talk about it that it's like this there's this amazing tension in the best moments between that reality and the performance of some sort of reality, and that there's that walking that line is part of maybe what makes it so exciting for folks.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a balance between the real and the unreal, and the emotions at the bottom of everything are very real. What you see on stage may or may not be real, but it feels real in the moment. It's like going to see, or it's like, like Star Wars, like going to see if you've ever been in like the audience of like a Star Wars movie, like that first opening night with all of the fans and just that energy that's in there. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's that similar kind of feeling where, the world on the screen isn't real, but it feels real in the moment. And especially to these fans who spend so much time and energy and just being part of it, like it becomes very real.
I think that's really interesting. I mean, there's so much that's interesting to me. Clearly, we could talk about this for forever. It's beyond fascinating. But I do want to kind of go back to what we said about Hybe's kind of spending spree, right? It buys Scooter Braun's Ithaca's Holding. It buys, then sets up Hybe America with Scooter Braun, a formidable figure who we're probably going to do an episode about as its CEO. But right, and then is making these big moves. Buys Quality Control, buys Ithaca Holdings, is making moves towards, I would argue, like various kind of Latin American, broadly Spanish language music markets, which are also probably, given the upward trend of that music, kind of currently undervalued, but not for long spaces, maybe. And it does feel in this really interesting way that, like, reading that kind of diversification kind of away from the Korean popular music that gave the company its base, it strikes me that, that maybe they're making a gamble, right? That with K-pop, the thing about K-pop is, in addition to, like, there's the SM version maybe, which is at the core of K-pop is like the idol production chops and the relationship with fans and kind of the traditional industry. And another version, which is that it's this like ability to get people invested in a universe and then suck them into these monetized environments. I mean, I'm wondering, reading reports about Hybe, like whether they're trying to replicate a similar economic structure in different kinds of music markets. Clearly, like, there hasn't been one of those. Like, Taylor Swift does not have the kind of platform infrastructure that BTS does. But if she did, she would make a lot of money.
Yeah, or a One Direction, a Harry Styles, same thing. If a Harry Styles had his own app where you could have your own Harry Styles fan fiction and all of that, yeah, you could make, or he could make a ton of money on that.
Yeah, it's just really interesting to see these kind of like these techniques developed within one set of like kind of genres, like maybe begin to circulate outside them.
Yeah, and I mean, other industries are watching what is happening in Korea, and this is something actually when Bang PD was doing his sort of run of English language news shows, one of the things he said flat out was that other industries are watching, and this was kind of a blip. I guess, was it last year? So there was this Brazilian singer Anitta, who used K-pop charting techniques to get herself #1 on global Spotify. Like studied what, like her fans studied what K-pop fans had done and replicated it to get her a number one. And the K-pop system is also in Thailand. They're also kind of replicating this. I mean, on a much smaller scale, but they're coming up behind the Philippines as well in their music industry. Kazakhstan, so other countries are watching and seeing what they're gonna do. So yeah, maybe it was the Brazilian number one that really focused their attention on South America, but yeah, other countries are definitely watching.
Kara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk us through this tangled K-pop web. It's like one of the most fascinating areas in the global music industry, and it's just such a pleasure to get a chance to discuss it with someone who really, really understands it.
Oh no, I'm happy you asked. Nobody in my real life enjoys hearing about this, so it's fun to talk.